The remaster of The Elder Scrolls Oblivion came out this year, and it sent massive shockwaves among the Elder Scrolls and the gaming community, with video posts comparing the original with the remaster, as well as possible conflict with the developers of Skyblivion, which, in my opinion, is pretty irrelevant because I have found that the dedicated fanbase of Oblivion will play the mod once it comes out despite the remaster being released, I being one of them. I could make a video playing through the remaster, but I think there's a lot of good videos already out there, so I think what I'm gonna do is what I do best for this channel to celebrate the release of Oblivion's remaster, and that's to make a lore video. One of the main things I was impressed about with the remaster is the details of the texture, but of course that would be the case considering the remaster came out nearly 16 years after the original, where there has been a massive advance in technology and graphics. But looking at the Emperor of Cyrodiil, he is definitely aged between the original and the remaster. We know the Emperor was in his dying moment at the time of Oblivion, but the graphics from the remaster really showed his aging body. Not just due to his time as Emperor, but also what he has gone through, which is only part of what we will cover in today's lore video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we cover the lore behind one of the members of the legendary Septim dynasty, Emperor Uriel VII. Uriel VII is born as the son of Emperor Pelagius IV, and he had a relatively normal childhood as of one who is expected to take up the imperial throne after the death of his father. You know how it is when it comes to dynasties. Someone within the bloodline is born and prepared to see the day they eventually ascend to the throne, then just utter chaos follows. A bit of a spoiler there, but to be fair, why are you watching this video if you don't want to get spoiled? Just saying. When it comes to the stories of the emperors, they usually have either very chaotic or very peaceful reigns. Uriel's childhood occurred during the latter, as there was little war and chaos in the lands of Tamriel during his father's rule. Well, there is one small detail about Uriel's childhood, and that was he had an invisible playmate whom he called Justin, which, by the way, not a name I would ever expect to hear in the Elder Scrolls universe, and that Prime Minister Symmachus of Morrowind would often inquire about the imaginary friend whenever he met with the young emperor, which would be met with half-mocking, half-serious responses from Uriel. By the time Pelagius died, the empire was the closest to its most stable state since the formation of the Septim dynasty, as well as the unification amongst the provinces, with Uriel expecting to continue its stability and prosperity. It was said that Uriel had inherited very important skills from his relatives: the diligence of his great-aunt Morihatha, the political skills of his uncle Uriel VI, and the military leadership skills of his great-grandfather Uriel V, making him a very capable but yet dangerous individual once he ascended to the throne. The real question is, how much of these skills did he practice talking to Justin? When Uriel inherited the Septim throne, he immediately proceeded to continue the expansion of the empire by pursuing bold policies towards provinces where imperial influence was at its weakest, especially in the Black Marsh and Morrowind, where attempts of establishing imperial rule has historically met resistance. Despite possible challenges, he had a very powerful ally, and that was his imperial battle mage, Yegar Tharn. He also had a wife, Calavoria, with whom he had fathered 3 sons, Geldal, Enman, and Ebel. However, his marriage was not stable as his wife was very arrogant, controlling, and ambitious, causing tension in their marriage that was witnessed by the 3 children. As a result, he had fathered 2 more children with mistresses, Calaxes and Martin, in order to escape from his wife. As he continued in his aggressive policy-making, his weaknesses began to be exposed. While he was making progress in the political landscape of Tamriel, having outclassed his superiors in the art of negotiation and diplomacy, he had developed a sense of self-pride and assurance, and his imperial battle mage had taken notice. Yegar Tharn had gained Uriel's full trust during his reign as emperor, to the point where he established an alliance with Mehrunes Dagon to betray the emperor and banish him to oblivion in 10 years in an event known as the Imperial Simulacrum, where the battle mage would take the guise of the emperor and proceed to ruin the empire from within while Dagon formulates his plan to invade Tamriel and take it over. If you want to know what Yegar Tharn had attempted to accomplish during this time, well, that's pretty simple. I covered a lore video on the Battlespire and the events that had happened there. Or you could simply play the game, which I watched through, and while its graphics are obviously not modern, the concept and story behind it was still pretty interesting. Now, there is mystery surrounding what actually happened to Uriel Septim while he was in Oblivion, and honestly, I think this kind of topic deserves a video of its own, so if that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comment section below, as well as leaving a like on this video if you're enjoying the content so far. Writing these stories is so much fun, and I want to show as many of the Elder Scrolls fanbase as possible, so feel free to share it to any of your friends. One thing is for certain, however, after the events of Battlesfire and Uriel Septim being rescued from Oblivion, his entire perspective changed. When he was younger, he was more energetic, prideful, and aggressive in his policymaking. Now he is calmer, patient, cautious, and more pessimistic about his views, and that carried with him until his death in the events of Oblivion. At the same time, he also returned to a slightly less stable version of the Empire. Of course, such is the case after 10 years of manipulation by Rhaegar Tharn, but he was still able to establish peace, although this time by doing deliberate manipulation behind the scenes using his personal guard, the Blades, as opposed to pursuing aggressive policies as what he would have done in his early years of rule. After the deposition of Rhaegar Tharn, Uriel proceeded to integrate the West into the grasp of the Empire and decided to focus his attention eastward. Much of his later reign was focused on gaining influence in Morrowind, especially after the conflicts between the houses. Then this takes us all the way to year 433 of the Fourth Era, when word comes out of attacks by the Mythic Dawn against the Emperor. When the Blades attempt to escort the Emperor through the cells, he comes across the eventual champion of Cyrodiil, whom the Emperor is aware of their existence. By the time we get to the events of Oblivion, Uriel Septim is much older and thus lost the useful energy he had after being imprisoned in Oblivion, as well as almost all of his children dead, including the triple assassinations of 3 of his sons and the mysterious disappearance from Calaxes, who, despite being an illegitimate son, was shown in public and participated in public affairs. Martin Septim, who he had kept hidden from the moment of his birth, was not assassinated because the Mythic Dawn had little information on him. He knows enough that when he sees the main character, his time in Tamriel is nearing its end, which ends up coming true. As they attempt to make their way through the sewers, the Mythic Dawn unleash their assault, and the Emperor ends up dying, but not before entrusting the hero with the Amulet of Kings and seeing to the end of Mehrunes Dagon's plans of invading Tamriel. While the Emperor of Cyrodiil did not live long enough through the victory of the Oblivion Crisis, his son played a very crucial role in defeating Mehrunes Dagon. But because that feat had costed him his life, as well as not bearing any children, that marked the end of the Septim dynasty. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? That even though Uriel Septim died, his legacy is still talked about as one of the more eventful and some might say prosperous era of the Empire. Full of youth and vigor to the more subtle and cautious tactics, and that was all because of one question that was never truly answered. What exactly happened to him during his time in Oblivion? Honestly, part of this could be recency bias, considering quite a few of the games in the mainstream and expansion timeline occurred during the reign of Uriel Septim, with Arena and Battlespire taking place during the Simulacrum, Daggerfall, and of course, Oblivion. I think this is a question that is worth making an entire lore video about, but there is something to do before we get there, and that is to leave a like on this video. Tell you what, if we can get 100 likes on this video, I will attempt to answer that question. I think it's going to be a fun time. Anyway, I'm going to get on up here, and I'll see you all in the next video. Consider subscribing, and enjoy the rest of your day.